The scent of lilies and old stone filled the air, a heady mix of life and permanence. My own life felt just as permanent in that moment, standing before the altar in the dress I dreamed of since I was a little girl. Liam's hand was warm and steady in mine, his thumb stroking my knuckles in a familiar, soothing rhythm. Through the delicate mesh of my veil, I saw his eyes, the color of a summer sky, crinkled in a smile that was just for me. This was it, the culmination of everything, the beginning of forever. The church was hushed, a sea of expectant faces turned towards us, bathed in the jewel-toned light filtering through the stained glass windows. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, joyous drumbeat. I took a breath, ready to say the words that would bind me to him. Father Michael cleared his throat, his voice, usually so gentle and resonant, sounding thin and strained. He opened his mouth, but the words that came out were not the ones from the liturgy. They were a jagged shard of ice in the warm, sacred air. "Stop," he said. A collective gasp rippled through the pews. My smile faltered. I looked at Liam, his own expression a mirror of my confusion. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Father Michael's gaze, heavy with a sorrow I couldn't comprehend, settled on me. He raised a trembling hand, not in blessing, but in accusation. He pointed, his finger a stark, unwavering line, aimed directly at my heart. "I cannot perform this union," he declared, his voice gaining a pained strength that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Not when there is a shadow of such profound sin." The murmuring in the church swelled into a roar of disbelief. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, hot and sharp. My cheeks burned with a shame I didn't understand. Sin? What sin? I was a good person. I loved this man. I had done nothing wrong. "Father, what is the meaning of this?" Liam's voice was low, laced with a protective anger. He stepped slightly in front of me, shielding me from the priest's gaze. But Father Michael's eyes never left mine. "There is a confession I must honor," he said, his voice cracking. "A truth that must be brought into the light before God. A truth concerning this woman." He still pointed at me. My breath hitched. The lilies suddenly smelled cloying, funereal. The beautiful light felt like an interrogation lamp. I could feel the presence of Liam's mother, Eleanor, behind me. I didn't have to turn to know her expression would be one of perfectly calibrated concern, her hand likely resting on her husband's arm in a show of unified support. She had always been so kind to me, treating me like the daughter she never had, especially after my own parents were gone. The memory of her warm embrace just this morning, her whisper of, "Welcome to the family, darling," felt like a cruel joke. "What truth?" I whispered, the words barely audible. "Tell us." Father Michael's hand finally dropped, but his gaze was relentless. "The truth," he said, his eyes welling with tears, "about how her parents really died." A cold dread, absolute and terrifying, washed over me, extinguishing the last embers of my wedding day joy. The car accident, the icy road, the swerving truck, the official story, the story I had lived with for 10 years. It was a tragedy, a horrible, random act of fate. It wasn't a sin. It wasn't my sin. But as I looked from the priest's tormented face to the sudden, unreadable stillness in Liam's, a tiny, poisonous seed of doubt began to sprout in the ruins of my happiness. A forgotten memory surfaced. Eleanor, a week after the funeral, her arm around my trembling shoulders, her voice a soft murmur in my ear. "Sometimes, my dear, Terrible things must happen for a greater good to be realized. You're with us now. You're safe." At the time, I had taken it as a clumsy but well-intentioned comfort. Now, standing at the altar with a priest's finger pointed at my soul, the words took on a new, monstrous shape. The greater good. My parents' death, my new life with Liam's family. The pieces didn't fit, yet they clicked together with a horrifying, sickening logic. The priest wasn't pointing at me. He was pointing at the secret I carried, the secret I didn't even know existed, a secret that had been waiting in the shadows all this time to devour my world whole. The ride back from the church was a silent, suffocating ordeal. I sat in the back of Eleanor's pristine sedan, the white satin of my wedding dress feeling like a shroud. Liam sat beside me, but the space between us was a chasm of unspoken questions and raw shock. He hadn't let go of my hand, but his grip was now tight, desperate, as if he were holding on to something that was already slipping through his fingers. Eleanor drove, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the road. Her husband, Robert, sat in the passenger seat, his face a grim, stony mask. The silence was punctuated only by the soft crunch of gravel as we turned onto the long driveway leading to their sprawling farmhouse, the place I was supposed to have called home. The place that now felt like a beautifully decorated trap. When the car stopped, no one moved for a long moment. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. "Well," Eleanor finally said, her voice brittle, "I suppose we should go inside." She sounded less like a grieving mother-in-law to be, and more like a general assessing a lost battle. Inside, the house was a mockery of celebration. Flowers drooped in their vases. A half-eaten platter of canapés sat on the coffee table, and a bottle of champagne sweat condensation onto the polished wood. The joy had evaporated, leaving behind a stale, funereal atmosphere. Liam finally let go of my hand and turned to face his parents. "Mother, Dad, what the hell was that? You have to know something. Father Michael wouldn't do that, not without a reason. A powerful reason." Eleanor sighed, a delicate, put-upon sound. She began moving around the room, plumping cushions, straightening picture frames, restoring order as if the chaos in our lives could be tidied away. "Liam, darling, the man is old. He's been under a great deal of stress. Perhaps he's confused." Confused? I finally found my voice, and it was sharper than I intended. He accused me of having a sin related to my parents' death. He pointed at me in front of 200 people. "That isn't confusion, Eleanor. That's an accusation." She turned to me, her expression a mask of gentle pity that made my skin crawl. "Clara, my dear, you are overwrought, and who could blame you? This has been a terrible, terrible shock. But we must not leap to conclusions." Robert cleared his throat. "Your mother is right, son. We need to handle this quietly. I'll have a word with the bishop. We can smooth this over. Perhaps a small ceremony somewhere else when this all dies down." They were trying to manage it, to contain it, not to understand it. A cold fury began to bubble beneath my shock. "Dies down?" I repeated, my voice rising. My wedding was just destroyed. My name was dragged through the mud in a church. And you want to smooth it over? Liam stepped towards me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Clara, please, let's just breathe. We'll figure this out. I'll go back and talk to Father Michael myself. I'll get to the bottom of it." But I knew I couldn't wait. I needed to know what the priest knew, what he thought I had done. "No," I said, my resolve hardening. "I'm going now." Before anyone could stop me, I turned and walked out the door, the heavy skirt of my dress whispering against the floor. I didn't care how I looked, a runaway bride on a mission. I got into my own car, the one still decorated with white ribbons and a just married sign that now felt like a cruel taunt, and drove back to the little stone church. Father Michael was in the rectory, sitting in a worn armchair, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a profound sadness. He looked a decade older than he had an hour ago. "Clara," he whispered, "I am so sorry, so deeply sorry for the pain I have caused you." "Why?" was all I could manage to say. "Why did you do it?" He gestured to the small wooden desk beside him. An old, yellowed envelope lay on its surface. "This arrived yesterday. It was placed in the confessional, unsigned. A coward's confession, but a confession nonetheless. I was instructed to read it only this morning. It contains a terrible story." He pushed the envelope towards me. My hand trembled as I reached for it. The paper was brittle with age. Inside, a single sheet of stationery was covered in a spidery, faded script. I began to read. The letter was a detailed, horrifying account of my parents' last day. It spoke of a business deal gone wrong, a partnership with Robert, Liam's father. It spoke of threats, of arguments overheard, and then it described the accident. It claimed the brakes on my father's car hadn't failed because of the ice. They had been tampered with. It described how someone had watched from a distance as the car careened off the bridge into the frozen river below, ensuring there were no survivors. The letter didn't name the killer. It only said that the person responsible had manipulated the aftermath, taking in the orphaned child to assuage their guilt and to control the inheritance my parents had left me, an inheritance I never knew was so substantial. The letter ended with a chilling sentence. "She is marrying into the family that destroyed hers. The priest must stop it. It is the only justice left." I sank into the chair opposite Father Michael, the letter fluttering from my numb fingers. The words swam before my eyes. Tampered brakes, a watcher, an inheritance, and me, the orphan, taken in by the very people who had orchestrated my parents' murder. It couldn't be true. It was a sick joke. A lie from some hateful, anonymous source. But then I thought of Eleanor's words. Terrible things must happen for a greater good to be realized. I thought of the way Robert had immediately tried to smooth things over, to bury the incident rather than investigate it. I thought of the comfortable life they lived, the sprawling farm, the easy wealth that I'd always been told came from generations of hard work, my inheritance, controlled by them. A wave of nausea washed over me. I looked at the priest, his face a mask of pity. "Who?" I choked out. "Who would do this?" He shook his head slowly. "I do not know. The letter is anonymous, but the details, the description of the bridge, the make of the car, they are specific. This is not the work of a madman, Clara. It is the work of a witness, or perhaps," he added, his voice dropping to a whisper, "the work of a penitent soul who can no longer bear the weight of their silence." I stood up, my body feeling disconnected from my mind. The white dress felt heavy, constricting. I had to get out of it. I had to get away. But where could I go? The home I was supposed to return to was now the scene of a potential crime, a place of unimaginable betrayal. And the man I loved, he was their son, my enemy's son. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. As I stumbled out of the rectory and back into the harsh daylight, I knew one thing with chilling certainty. My wedding day wasn't the end of a nightmare. It was just the beginning. The drive back to the farm was a blur of fragmented thoughts and a rising tide of panic. The anonymous letter lay on the passenger seat, a venomous presence in the car. Every word was seared into my brain. Tampered brakes, inheritance, a greater good. I kept seeing my parents' faces, smiling, vibrant, full of life. Then I saw their car, a twisted wreck at the bottom of a ravine. The two images warred in my mind, the beautiful memory and the horrifying new reality. When I pulled up to the house, Liam was waiting on the porch. The sight of him, his handsome face, etched with worry, sent a fresh wave of pain through me. How could I look at him now without seeing his parents, without wondering what he knew, what part he played, even unwittingly, in this monstrous deception? "Clara, thank God," he said, rushing to my side as I got out of the car. "I was about to come after you. What did he say? What's going on?" I couldn't speak. I just held out the letter. He took it, his brow furrowed in confusion. He leaned against the car, his tuxedo looking absurdly out of place in the grim afternoon light, and began to read. I watched his face, searching for any sign of recognition, of guilt, of prior knowledge. I saw only shock, then disbelief, then a dawning horror that mirrored my own. His face went pale. "This is insane," he breathed, looking up at me, his eyes wide. "This is some kind of sick, twisted prank. My father, he would never—" "Clara, you can't possibly believe this." His denial was so absolute, so genuine, that for a moment I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was all a lie. But the details in the letter felt too real, too specific. And Eleanor's words echoed in my mind, a persistent, chilling refrain. "He was your father's business partner," I said, my voice flat. "Is that true?" He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the letter. "Yes, for a few years. They were trying to develop some land together, but the deal fell through right before the accident. Dad said your father overextended himself, took too many risks." "Or maybe my father found out something," I countered, the suspicion coiling like a snake in my gut. "Maybe he discovered your father was cheating him, and Robert couldn't let him expose it." "No." Liam's voice was sharp, defensive. "My dad is an honorable man. He took you in, Clara. He and my mother, they raised you after you had no one. Does that sound like something a murderer would do?" That was the crux of it, wasn't it? The perfect cover, the ultimate act of misdirection. Take in the orphan of the man you killed, and who would ever suspect you? It was diabolical in its brilliance. Eleanor and Robert appeared at the front door, their faces composed, expectant. "Liam, Clara, is everything all right?" Eleanor called out, her voice smooth as silk. Liam crumpled the letter in his fist. "No, Mother, everything is not all right." He strode towards them, his movements stiff with anger. "Someone sent a letter to Father Michael, a poison pen letter, full of disgusting lies about you, Dad, about Clara's parents." He held out the crumpled ball of paper. Robert took it, his face unreadable. He smoothed it out and read it, Eleanor looking over his shoulder. I watched them, my heart pounding. I expected outrage, vehement denials, threats of legal action. Instead, I saw a flicker of something else in Eleanor's eyes. It was there for only a second, a glint of cold, hard calculation before it was masked by a look of wounded sorrow. Robert, on the other hand, just looked tired. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "This is libel," he said, his voice heavy. "Vicious, baseless slander." "Then we go to the police," I said, stepping forward. "We have them investigate this. We find out who wrote it. We clear your name." Eleanor let out a small, pained laugh. "Oh, my dear, sweet, naive Clara. And what would we tell them? That an anonymous, crazy letter has accused us of a crime from 10 years ago? They would laugh us out of the station. It would only create a scandal, drag all our names through the mud, for nothing." Her logic was sound, yet it felt all wrong. It felt like containment, like damage control. "I don't care about a scandal," I said, my voice trembling. "I care about the truth." "The truth," Eleanor said, stepping towards me and placing her hands on my arms, "is that some cruel person wanted to ruin our happiness today. And we cannot let them succeed. We are a family. We will get through this together, quietly." Her grip was surprisingly strong, her manicured nails digging slightly into my skin. Her eyes, so often warm and maternal, were like chips of ice. In that moment, I felt a profound, bone-deep fear. She wasn't trying to comfort me. She was trying to control me. She was warning me. Liam looked torn, his loyalty split, between me and the parents he had trusted his whole life. "Mom's right, Clara," he said, his voice pleading. Let's not do anything rash. Let's just come inside. We can talk this through." I looked from his desperate face to Eleanor's cold, watchful eyes, and Robert's weary resignation. They were closing ranks, presenting a united front. And I was on the outside. The letter may have been anonymous, but it had done its work. It had planted a seed of doubt that was now a thorny, choking vine. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't pretend this hadn't happened. I couldn't sleep under the same roof as the people who might have murdered my parents. "I can't," I whispered, pulling away from Eleanor's grasp. "I need some time. I need to think." "Where will you go?" Liam asked, a note of panic in his voice. "I'll go to Sarah's," I said, naming my maid of honor, my best friend since childhood. "Just for a night or two. I need some space." Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear. You take all the time you need. We understand completely. But remember," she added, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper, "this house is your home. We will be waiting for you." It didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a threat. As I got back in my car and drove away from the farm for the second time that day, I felt their eyes on me. I wasn't just leaving a ruined wedding. I was fleeing, and I had the terrible feeling that I was being hunted. The drive to Sarah's apartment felt like a surreal journey through a world that no longer made sense. The familiar streets of my hometown seemed alien, colored by the grotesque lens of the anonymous letter. Every passing car held a potential watcher, every shadow a hidden threat. When Sarah opened the door, her face, which had been a mixture of confusion and concern at the church, crumpled into pure shock at the sight of me. I was still in my wedding dress, now creased and slightly grimy. My carefully styled hair was coming undone, and my makeup was smudged from tears. I didn't even remember crying. "Clara, oh my God, what happened? Everyone is calling me, asking, is it true, what the priest said?" she stammered, pulling me inside and wrapping me in a hug that I desperately needed. I collapsed into her embrace, the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally breaking. Sobs racked my body, great, gulping gasps for air. I cried for my lost wedding day, for the love I thought I had, and most of all, for the parents I was now grieving all over again in a new and terrible way. Sarah just held me, murmuring soothing words until the storm passed, leaving me empty and exhausted. She led me to her sofa, wrapped me in a blanket, and made me a cup of tea. Her practical kindness, a small anchor in my swirling chaos. When I could finally speak, I told her everything. I showed her the letter. She read it, her expression hardening from sympathy to disbelief, and then to a cold, simmering anger. "These people," she said, her voice low and furious. "Clara, this is monstrous. You can't go back there." "I know," I whispered, staring into the steam rising from my mug. "But what do I do? Liam thinks it's a lie. His parents are closing ranks. They want to bury it. If I go to the police, it's my word and an anonymous letter against a respected family." "So we get more than just a letter," Sarah said, her eyes alight with a fierce loyalty that warmed me to my core. "We investigate. You lived in that house for 10 years, Clara. You know its secrets. You know them. There has to be something, some proof, old files, letters, account books, something that corroborates what's in this letter." Her words sparked a tiny flame of purpose in the hollow pit of my stomach. She was right. I couldn't run. I had to fight. I had to know the truth, for my own sanity and for my parents. The first step was to formulate a plan. I couldn't go back to the farm as an accuser. They would never let me near anything that could incriminate them. I had to go back as the grieving, confused fiancée, the prodigal daughter returning to the fold. I had to play the part, make them believe I had come to my senses, that I had chosen to believe them over the ravings of an anonymous letter writer. It was a dangerous game. It meant living with them, eating at their table, sleeping under their roof, all while pretending I didn't suspect them of the ultimate betrayal. It meant watching every word I said, every expression on my face. It meant becoming a spy in my own life. "It's too dangerous," Sarah said, reading my mind. "What if they suspect you? What if this letter has made them paranoid?" "It's the only way," I insisted, the plan taking shape. "They're overconfident. Eleanor thinks she can manage me, manage the situation. Robert just wants it all to go away. They'll underestimate me. They'll see me as a hysterical girl who just needs to be calmed down and brought back into line." I would call Liam. I would tell him I'd had time to think, that he was right, that the letter was a cruel prank designed to tear us apart, and that I wasn't going to let it. I would tell him I was coming home. My stomach churned at the thought of the lies I would have to tell, the deception I would have to live. But the alternative, walking away, never knowing the truth, was unthinkable. My parents deserved more than that. I spent the night at Sarah's, sleeping fitfully on her sofa. In my dreams, I was back at the church, but this time, when Father Michael pointed, my parents were standing behind him, their faces pale and pleading, their eyes begging me to see what was right in front of me. I woke up with a renewed, steely resolve. I took a shower, washing away the last remnants of my wedding day. I borrowed some of Sarah's clothes, simple jeans and a sweater, armor for the battle ahead. I looked at myself in the mirror. The bride was gone. In her place was a woman I barely recognized, her eyes shadowed with grief and a grim determination. I picked up my phone and dialed Liam's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with sleeplessness and anxiety. "Clara, Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said, my voice carefully controlled, injecting a note of weary resignation. "Liam, I've been thinking all night, and you're right, it's crazy. It's just a piece of paper with lies on it. I let it get to me. I panicked. I'm so sorry." I could hear the audible relief in his sigh. "Oh, Clara, I was so worried. I knew you'd see it. It's not them. It could never be them." "I know," I lied. "I want to come home." "Yes," he said, his voice filled with a desperate hope. "Yes, please come home. We can fix this. We can still fix this." As I hung up the phone, a cold dread settled over me. I was walking back into the lion's den, but this time I knew the lions were there. I had a secret mission: to find the evidence that would either prove their innocence and give me back my life, or confirm their guilt and avenge my parents. "Be careful," Sarah whispered as I prepared to leave, her hand on my arm. "Call me every day. If I don't hear from you for 24 hours, I'm calling the police, no matter what you say." I nodded, grateful for her foresight. "I will." We established a code. If I said I was feeling under the weather, it meant I was in trouble. If I mentioned I was rereading my favorite classics, it meant I had found something important. It felt like something out of a spy novel, but my life had suddenly become one. Driving back to the farm, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overlaid with purpose. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was an agent of the truth. As I pulled into the driveway, Eleanor was standing on the porch, a welcoming smile on her face. It was the same smile she had worn my entire life, but now I could see the steel beneath it. "Welcome home, darling," she said, opening her arms for a hug. I stepped into her embrace, my body rigid, my mind racing. The game had begun. Returning to the farmhouse was like stepping onto a stage, set for a play in which only I knew the true, horrifying script. Every familiar object seemed to mock me with its placid domesticity. The cheerful yellow curtains in the kitchen, the worn floral armchair where I used to read, the family photos lining the hallway, they were all props in a meticulously crafted illusion of a happy family. Eleanor was the lead actress, her performance flawless. She fussed over me, making me tea, insisting I must be exhausted. All the while her eyes were sharp, assessing, searching for any cracks in my facade. Liam, bless his heart, was so relieved to have me back that he was blind to the undercurrents of tension. He believed I had accepted the poison pen letter theory and was ready to move on. He clung to me, his love a genuine, warm presence that made my deception feel all the more painful. Robert remained in the background, quiet and withdrawn, his face etched with a permanent weariness. He avoided my gaze, which I found more telling than any of Eleanor's carefully chosen words. My first priority was to search Robert's study. It was the heart of the family's business operations, a room I had rarely entered. It was strictly his domain. Gaining access without raising suspicion would be difficult. I waited for 2 days, playing the part of the fragile but recovering fiancé. I spoke of rescheduling the wedding, of wanting to put the unpleasantness behind us. I watched Eleanor relax, saw the triumphant gleam in her eye. She believed she had won. She thought I was once again the pliable, grateful orphan she had raised. On the 3rd night, my opportunity came. Robert and Eleanor were hosting a small dinner for some local business associates, a transparent attempt to project an aura of normalcy, to quell any lingering gossip from the wedding disaster. Liam was tasked with showing them around the newer barns. It was my chance. Feigning a headache, I excused myself from the dinner party, earning a sympathetic look from Eleanor. "Of course, dear, you go and rest. Liam and I can handle this." I went upstairs, but instead of going to my room, I crept silently down the back staircase that led to the corridor outside Robert's study. The door was, as always, locked, but I had planned for this. Weeks ago, during the wedding preparations, Eleanor had given me a spare set of keys to the house, a symbolic gesture of welcoming me. I had noticed a small, old-fashioned brass key on the ring, one I hadn't recognized. On a hunch, I had tried it on the study door one afternoon when no one was home. It had fit. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid the key into the lock. The click of the tumblers sounded deafeningly loud in the quiet hallway. I slipped inside, closing the door gently behind me, and was immediately enveloped in the scent of old paper, leather, and pipe smoke. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the large window. I didn't dare turn on a light. Using the flashlight on my phone, I began my search. The letter had mentioned a land development deal. I started with the filing cabinets. The drawers were meticulously organized, years of financial records and correspondence filed away. I scanned the labels: livestock, feed suppliers, taxes. Finally, I found a drawer labeled Investments and Partnerships. My hands trembled as I pulled it open. Inside, I found a folder with my father's name on it: Blackwood Creek Development, J. Miller. My father was James Miller. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. The folder contained contracts, blueprints, and letters exchanged between my father and Robert. The early correspondence was friendly, optimistic. They were going to make a fortune. But as I delved deeper, the tone changed. I found letters from my father accusing Robert of mismanaging funds, of hiding profits. The last letter was dated 2 days before the accident. It was a formal, angry letter from my father's lawyer, demanding a full audit and threatening legal action. "You have cooked the books, Robert," my father had written in a handwritten note in the margin. "I will expose you." My blood ran cold. This was it, the motive. Robert was embezzling money, and my father had found out. Killing him wasn't just about stopping the exposure. It was about silencing his partner and gaining full control of the project and its assets. And my inheritance, it would have included my father's share of that development. By becoming my guardian, Robert gained control of my finances, of everything. I needed more. I needed proof of the murder itself, not just the motive. I frantically searched the desk, my flashlight beam dancing over its surface. In the bottom drawer, tucked away beneath a stack of old checkbooks, I found a small leather-bound journal. It was Robert's. I flipped it open. Most of it was mundane notes about the farm, but then I found the entries from the week of my parents' death. His handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. "He knows," one entry read. "Jim gave me an ultimatum. An audit, or he goes to the police. He'll ruin everything. Eleanor says there is no other way. She says it has to look like an accident. She's talking about the brake lines on his car. God help me, she's right. It's for the family, for Liam's future." My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just Robert. It was Eleanor. She was the architect, the cold, calculating mind behind it all. Robert was the weak-willed accomplice, driven by fear and greed. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. The woman who had hugged me, who had called me her daughter, had planned my parents' murder. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The dinner party must have been ending. I shoved the journal back into the drawer, my mind racing. I couldn't take it with me. They would know I had been in here. I had to leave it. But I had the proof I needed. I had seen it with my own eyes. I quickly took a photo of the journal entry with my phone. My hands shaking so much, the first 2 attempts were blurry. The third was clear. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, locked the study door behind me, and scurried back upstairs, just as the first guests were saying their goodbyes in the foyer below. I got into my room and leaned against the door, my body trembling uncontrollably. I had the truth, but the truth was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. I was living in a house with 2 murderers, and they thought I was safely back under their control. I sent a quick coded text to Sarah. Decided to reread some of my favorite classics tonight. The ending is a shocker. I knew she would understand. The next phase of my plan had to begin immediately. This wasn't just about exposing them anymore. This was about getting out of this house alive. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Armed with the horrifying knowledge from Robert's journal, I had to maintain an illusion of blissful ignorance, while every nerve in my body screamed with terror. Eleanor, believing the crisis was averted, became even more affectionate, her gestures of maternal love now feeling like the caresses of a spider. She would touch my arm as she passed, her fingers cool on my skin, and I would have to fight the urge to flinch. She spoke constantly of the future, of replanning the wedding, of grandchildren, painting a beautiful picture of the life she had secured for her son, over the bodies of my parents. It was sickening. Liam remained my unwitting jailer. His love and concern were a constant, painful reminder of the life I was supposed to have, the life they had stolen from me. He would talk about our future, and I would have to smile and nod, my heart breaking with every lie I told. My greatest fear was that my mask would slip, that a flicker of the revulsion and terror I felt would show in my eyes. I focused on the plan. I had the photo of the journal entry, a digital bombshell, but a single photo could be dismissed as a forgery. I needed more. I needed a confession, and I knew only one of them was arrogant enough and cruel enough to give it to me, Eleanor. Robert was a ghost, haunted by his guilt. He barely spoke, his eyes were sunken, and he seemed to age years in a matter of days. He was a broken man, but Eleanor was vibrant, powerful, energized by her success. She was the one I had to break. I began subtly planting seeds of doubt in her mind. I would accidentally leave a book about famous cold cases open on the coffee table. I would mention a news story about an old crime being solved with new technology. I wanted her to feel a prickle of unease, to wonder if the past was truly buried. I needed to unnerve her, to push her off balance. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. Robert announced he had to go to a multi-day cattle auction 2 states over. He seemed desperate to get away from the house, from Eleanor, from me. Liam, ever the dutiful son, offered to go with him, to help with the driving and the bidding. "It'll just be us girls," Eleanor said, with a bright, predatory smile after they left. "We can have a lovely time, do some baking, perhaps plan the new wedding invitations." The house suddenly felt immense, empty, and terrifyingly isolated. The long driveway was our only connection to the outside world. There were no close neighbors, just me and her. The night before Liam and Robert were due to leave, I put the next stage of my plan into action. I called Sarah. "I'm feeling a little under the weather," I said, the code phrase sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. "I think I might have a bad flu coming on." "Oh no," Sarah replied, her voice instantly sharp with understanding. "That's terrible. Do you need me to bring you anything? Some soup?" "No, I'll be fine," I said, trying to sound weak. "I'm just going to rest. I probably won't be up for talking for a day or two. Just wanted to let you know." "You take care of yourself," she said, the hidden message clear. "I'm ready. If I don't hear from you in 48 hours, I'm coming." The next morning, as Liam and Robert's truck disappeared down the driveway, a chilling quiet settled over the farm. It was just me and Eleanor. She was in the kitchen, humming as she kneaded dough for her famous sourdough bread. The domesticity of the scene was grotesque. "Feeling any better, dear?" she asked without looking up, her hands rhythmically pushing and folding the dough. "A little," I lied, leaning against the doorframe. "I was thinking about the letter, the one Father Michael got." Her hands stilled for a fraction of a second before resuming their steady rhythm. "Clara, I thought we agreed to put that ugliness behind us." "I know," I said, my voice quiet, laced with a carefully manufactured confusion. But there was something in it about my parents' inheritance. It said it was substantial. I never knew that. You and Robert always told me they left just enough to cover my college expenses. This was a calculated risk. I was moving from subtle hints to a direct challenge. I saw her back stiffen. She finally turned to face me, wiping her floury hands on her apron. Her smile was gone. Her face was a cold, smooth mask. "Your parents made some unwise investments, dear. What little was left, Robert and I managed carefully to make sure you were provided for. The letter was full of lies. Remember?" "I know, but what if that part was true?" I pressed on, my heart pounding. What if they did leave a lot of money? Where would it have gone? "That is a very ugly question, Clara," she said, her voice dropping, losing its maternal warmth and taking on a dangerous edge. "It sounds almost like an accusation." "It's not," I said quickly, feigning hurt. "I'm just confused. That day, it destroyed everything. I just want to understand." She watched me for a long moment, her eyes narrowed. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was debating whether I was a genuine threat or just a hysterical girl she needed to put back in her place one last time. Her arrogance won. "Understand?" she said, taking a step closer. "You want to understand. You have no idea what understanding is. You lived a fairy tale life in this house, a life you didn't deserve, a life that was bought for you." Her voice was low, venomous. The mask was slipping. This was it. I discreetly turned on the voice recorder app on my phone, which was in my pocket, my thumb pressing the screen through the fabric. "What do you mean, bought for me?" I whispered, letting a tremor of fear into my voice. It wasn't hard to fake. "Your father was a fool," she hissed, her face contorted with a decade of repressed resentment. "He was going to ruin my husband, ruin my son's future, all for a little bit of money and his own self-righteous pride. He was a threat to this family. And threats," she said, taking another step closer, her eyes glittering, "need to be eliminated." "You're talking about the business deal," I stammered, feeding her the line. "I'm talking about pest control, my dear," she said with a chilling smile. "Sometimes you have to root out the problem before it infests the whole house. Your parents were an infestation, so I called the exterminator." The casual cruelty of her words stole my breath. She wasn't just confessing, she was boasting. She saw it as a victory, a necessary and clever act of preservation. "Robert," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Robert did what was necessary, what I told him to do. He never had the stomach for it, but he understood the stakes. He did it for Liam. We both did. Everything we have, this beautiful life, we built it for our son. On the ashes of your pathetic little family. She reached out and caressed my cheek, her touch icy. "And you were the prize, the little orphan girl. Taking you in was a stroke of genius. No one would ever suspect the grieving benefactors. You were the perfect alibi." She laughed, a short, ugly sound. "And you were so grateful, so easy to mold. Now let's not have any more of this foolishness. You are going to marry my son, and you are going to be grateful for the life we have given you. Do you understand?" I simply stared at her, my mind reeling, the recording on my phone capturing every monstrous word. I had it. I had the confession. Now all I had to do was survive the next 24 hours. The confession hung in the air between us, a toxic, invisible cloud. Eleanor seemed to think her brutal honesty had shocked me back into submission. She turned back to her bread dough as if she had merely been discussing the weather, her movements once again calm and methodical. For her, the conversation was over. She had reasserted her dominance. But for me, the world had tilted on its axis. The air in the kitchen was thick and heavy, and I felt like I was breathing in poison. I had to get away, to put space between myself and this monster. I think I'll go lie down," I murmured, my voice hoarse. "My headache is back." "You do that, dear," she said without turning around. "Rest up. We have a lot of planning to do tomorrow." I backed out of the kitchen slowly, my legs feeling like lead. I didn't turn my back on her until I was out of the room. I crept up the stairs to my bedroom, my hand protectively covering the phone in my pocket. The recording was my lifeline, my only weapon. I locked my bedroom door, something I never did, and leaned against it, my body shaking with a mixture of terror and triumph. I had her. It was all there, her cold, boastful confession. I immediately sent the audio file to Sarah, along with a text. "I'm rereading my favorite classic, just got to the big reveal, sending you a copy." Then I sent the same file to a cloud storage account, a backup in case anything happened to my phone. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. The evidence was safe. Now I just had to wait. The rest of the day passed in a slow-motion nightmare. I stayed in my room, pretending to sleep. I heard Eleanor moving about the house, humming her cheerful tune, the sound of which now made my blood run cold. Around lunchtime, she knocked on my door. "Clara, I've made some soup for you, dear. It'll help you feel better." "I'm not hungry, thank you," I called out, my voice muffled by the door. "Nonsense, you need to eat." Her voice was firm with an undercurrent of command. "I'll leave it outside the door for you." I waited until I heard her footsteps retreat before I opened the door. A tray with a steaming bowl of her homemade chicken noodle soup sat on the floor. It was my favorite. She used to make it for me whenever I was sick as a child. The smell, which once meant comfort and care, now seemed menacing. A paranoid thought flashed through my mind. What if she had put something in it? Was she trying to drug me, to silence me permanently now that she had revealed herself? I couldn't take the risk. I took the tray into my room and poured the soup down the toilet in my ensuite bathroom, then rinsed the bowl and put it back on the tray outside my door. The hours crawled by. As evening fell, a new, more immediate fear began to set in. Liam and Robert weren't due back until the following evening. That meant another night, another full day, alone in this house with her. Sarah knew to call the police if she didn't hear from me, but Eleanor was clever. She could force me to make a call, to say everything was fine. I realized I couldn't just wait to be rescued. I had to get out. My bedroom window overlooked the sloping roof of the back porch. It was a risky drop, but it was a possible escape route. I decided to wait until she was asleep. I would climb out, run to the main road, and call for help. I lay on my bed, fully clothed, my heart pounding in a frantic rhythm, listening for the sounds of the house settling for the night. Around 10 p.m., I heard her footsteps come up the stairs. They paused outside my door. I held my breath. "Good night, Clara," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "Sleep well." I didn't answer. I heard her walk down the hall to her own bedroom, the door clicking shut. I waited for another hour, an eternity of listening to the old house groan and creak. Then I moved. I quietly unlocked my door, needing to make sure the coast was clear before attempting my escape. I peered out into the darkened hallway. A thin sliver of light shone from under Eleanor's bedroom door. She wasn't asleep. My blood went cold. Was she waiting for me? I backed into my room, my escape plan in tatters. I was trapped. Panic began to set in, a clawing, suffocating feeling. I paced the room like a caged animal, my mind racing. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound at my bedroom door. Not a knock, a scratch, like a key being gently, carefully inserted into the lock from the outside. My heart leapt into my throat. She had a key. Of course she had a key. She was locking me in. I was no longer a guest in this house. I was a prisoner. I stood frozen in the center of the room, listening. I heard the faint click of the lock engaging. Then silence. I was locked in. My escape route was gone. The phone was my only hope. I texted Sarah, my fingers fumbling on the screen. "Feeling much worse. The weather has taken a turn. Call for a doctor now." It was a deviation from the plan, but I was desperate. Doctor was our emergency word for the police. A minute later, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Doctor is on the way. ETA 20 minutes. Stay safe. I love you." 20 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. I had to hold on for 20 minutes. I dragged the heavy oak dresser in my room and pushed it against the door, a flimsy barricade, but it made me feel slightly safer. I huddled in the corner of the room, my eyes glued to the door, listening. For several minutes, there was only silence. Then I smelled it, smoke, a faint, acrid smell seeping in from under the door. My eyes widened in horror. The house was old, made of dry timber. A fire would spread in minutes. She wasn't just trying to trap me, she was trying to kill me. She was going to burn the evidence, burn me, and create a new story. The tragic accident. The grieving fiancé, so distraught she accidentally started a fire. It was a perfect, horrifying echo of what she had done to my parents. The smoke grew thicker, stinging my eyes, catching in my throat. I started to cough. I ran to the bathroom, soaked a towel in water, and held it over my mouth and nose. The smoke alarm in the hallway began to shriek, a piercing, relentless wail. I heard her shouting from downstairs, a performance for any potential witnesses. Clara, oh my God, Clara, there's a fire. I knew I had only minutes. The window was my only chance. I grabbed a heavy lamp from the bedside table and smashed it against the window pane. The glass shattered, exploding outwards. Cold night air rushed in, clearing some of the smoke. I scrambled onto the windowsill, my lungs burning. The porch roof was slick with dew, glistening under the moonlight. It was at least a 12-foot drop to the ground from there. I didn't hesitate. I swung my legs over the sill and half slid, half jumped onto the sloping roof, my sneakers scrabbling for purchase. I slid down the shingles, my hands raw, and tumbled off the edge, landing hard in the soft soil of Eleanor's prized rose garden. Pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline surged through me, overriding it. I scrambled to my feet, limping heavily, and ran. I didn't look back at the house, at the orange glow now visible in my bedroom window, at the woman who was my mother, my mentor, my murderer. I just ran, stumbling through the darkness, towards the distant headlights I could see turning into the long driveway. Help was here. The doctor was here. I burst out of the tree line at the end of the long driveway, just as 2 police cars, sirens screaming, skidded to a halt on the gravel. I must have been a terrifying sight. A soot-stained, frantic woman in jeans, one shoe missing, limping and gasping for breath. A female officer rushed towards me, her face a mixture of alarm and concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? What's happening?" "She tried to kill me," I choked out, pointing back towards the house, where smoke was now billowing more thickly from the second floor. "She set a fire. She locked me in my room." Just then, Eleanor appeared on the front porch, a perfect picture of distress. A phone pressed to her ear, as if she had been the one to call for help. "Oh, thank God!" she cried, running towards us, her nightgown flowing around her. "Clara, you're safe. I was so worried." The fire started in her room, I don't know how, maybe a candle. "She's lying," I yelled, my voice raw. "She confessed everything. She murdered my parents. I have it on tape." The officers exchanged a look, their expressions shifting to cautious professionalism. They were dealing with a fire, a potential domestic dispute, and a hysterical woman making wild accusations. I knew how it looked. "Ma'am, let's just calm down," the male officer said gently. "Why don't you come and sit in the car while the firefighters deal with the house?" Eleanor rushed to my side, trying to put her arm around me. "Oh, you poor dear, you're in shock. The fire must have terrified you. Let's get you looked at." I recoiled from her touch, as if I'd been burned. "Don't touch me! Get away from me!" My frantic reaction probably made me look even more unstable, but I didn't care. At that moment, another car pulled up, behind the police cruisers. Sarah jumped out, her face pale with fear. "Clara," she shouted, running to me and pushing past Eleanor to get to my side. "Are you okay? I got your message." "Sarah, the recording," I gasped, my ankle throbbing. "I sent it to you. Play it for them, please." Sarah's presence seemed to shift the dynamic. She was a calm, credible witness. She looked at the officers. "My friend is not crazy," she said, her voice firm and clear. "She's been a prisoner in that house. The woman standing right there," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Eleanor, "is a murderer, and Clara has the proof." Eleanor scoffed, a sound of pure indignation. "This is absurd. My son's fiancée is having some kind of breakdown. This is a private family matter." The lead officer looked at Sarah. "What proof are you talking about?" Sarah took out her phone. A voice recording sent to me less than an hour ago. A full confession. She pressed play. In the surreal quiet of the night, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the shouts of the arriving fire crew, Eleanor's voice filled the air, crisp and clear from the phone's speaker. Your parents were an infestation, so I called the exterminator. Robert did what was necessary. What I told him to do, we built it for our son. On the ashes of your pathetic little family. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Her mask of concerned matriarch shattered, revealing the cold, reptilian monster beneath. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The officers stared at her, their expressions hardening into disbelief, then grim certainty. Everything we have, this beautiful life, her recorded voice continued, a chilling testament to her own evil. We built it for our son. The recording ended. A heavy silence fell. One of the officers slowly reached for his handcuffs. Eleanor finally broke, her composure crumbling into pure animal panic. "It's a trick," she shrieked, her voice high and ragged. "She doctored it. She's a liar. She's always been a jealous, ungrateful little—" She lunged at me, her fingers crooked into claws, her face a mask of fury. The female officer intercepted her instantly, grabbing her arms and twisting them behind her back with practiced efficiency. The click of the handcuffs locking around her wrists was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. As they led her, screaming and struggling, towards one of the patrol cars, a black pickup truck came roaring up the driveway, skidding to a stop. Liam and Robert jumped out, their faces aghast at the scene of flashing lights, smoke, and Eleanor in handcuffs. "Mom?" Liam cried out, his voice filled with utter confusion. "What's going on, Clara? Are you okay?" He ran towards me, but stopped short when he saw the look on my face. Robert stood frozen, his eyes fixed on Eleanor, his face a canvas of dawning, abject horror. He knew it was all over. I looked at Liam, the man I had loved, the man whose future had been built on the ashes of my family. There was no anger left in me, only a vast, empty sadness. "She told me everything, Liam," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "Everything she and your father did to my parents. I have her confession." Liam looked from me to his mother, who was now weeping hysterically in the back of the police car, then to his father, who had sagged against the truck as if his legs could no longer support him. The truth, undeniable and ugly, crashed down on him. His entire life, his entire identity was a lie. His face crumpled, and a sound of pure, ragged grief was torn from his throat. It was the sound of a world ending. Another officer approached Robert, who didn't even try to run. He just held out his wrists, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "It was her," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. It was all her idea. The sun was beginning to rise as they led him away, casting a pale gray light on the wreckage of our lives. The fire was out, leaving a blackened, gaping hole in the side of the beautiful farmhouse. Paramedics were tending to my ankle. Sarah sat beside me, her arm wrapped tightly around my shoulders, a silent, solid presence. I watched them take Liam for questioning, his movements like a sleepwalker's. Our story was over. The truth was out. And in the cold morning light, surrounded by the ruins, I finally felt the first fragile stirring of freedom. The aftermath was a blur of police stations, witness statements, and lawyers. The audio recording was the linchpin of the case, an undeniable piece of evidence. coupled with the photo of Robert's journal entry and his immediate, full confession, the prosecution had an airtight case. Robert, desperate to save his son from any implication and perhaps to find some sliver of redemption, told them everything. He detailed how Eleanor had planned the murder, how he had cut the brake lines, and how they had systematically hidden and absorbed my parents' assets, including the lucrative Blackwood Creek development, which had made them millionaires. Eleanor, on the other hand, fought. She hired the most expensive defense attorney in the state. Her story changed daily. I was a mentally unstable gold digger. The recording was a sophisticated deep fake. Robert was a liar trying to pin his own crimes on her. She was a victim, but her lies were no match for the truth. The trial was a media circus. I had to testify. Sitting in the witness box, looking out at the courtroom, was one of the hardest things I have ever done. I saw Eleanor at the defendant's table, her face a mask of cold fury. I saw Liam in the public gallery, looking like a ghost, his eyes hollowed out by grief and shame. I had to recount everything, the idyllic life I thought I had, the horror of my ruined wedding day, the slow dawning terror, the confession in the kitchen, and the fire. I told my story, my voice shaking but clear, and when they played the recording for the jury, a collective gasp went through the courtroom. Hearing Eleanor's cold, cruel words echo in that formal, silent room was a final, terrible validation. It took the jury less than 4 hours to find them both guilty. Eleanor was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and attempted murder for the fire. She received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years. Robert, who pleaded guilty and testified against her, received a lesser sentence for second-degree murder, 25 to life. Liam and I never spoke again. I saw him one last time on the day of the sentencing. Our eyes met across the crowded courtroom. I saw in his gaze a universe of pain, regret, and loss. He was as much a victim of his parents' evil as I was, in a different way. He had lost his entire family, his entire past, and the future he thought he had. I gave him a small, sad nod, a final acknowledgement of the love we once shared, and then I turned away. There was nothing left to say. The farm and all their assets were seized as part of the legal proceedings. A portion of it was returned to me, the rightful heir of the money they had stolen. It felt like blood money. I used it to set up a foundation in my parents' names, a charity for victims of violent crime. It was the only way I could cleanse it, to turn their greed into something good. Sarah was my rock through it all. She let me stay with her for months, holding me when I woke up from nightmares, making me eat when I had no appetite, and reminding me that I was a survivor, not just a victim. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild my life. I moved to a new city, a place with no memories, no ghosts. I got a simple job at a library, surrounded by the quiet and the stories of others. The anonymity was a balm to my soul. For a long time, I was afraid to trust, afraid to love. The betrayal had run so deep it had poisoned the well of my own heart. I saw Eleanor's calculating smile in every friendly stranger, heard her lies in every kind word. But time, as it does, began to heal the wound. It left a scar, a permanent reminder of what I had endured, but the raw pain began to fade. I started therapy. I learned to separate the evil of 2 people from the goodness that still existed in the world. I learned that their darkness did not have to extinguish my light. One day, about 2 years after the trial, I was walking in a park and saw a young couple taking their wedding photos. The bride was beautiful, her face radiant with joy. The groom looked at her with pure adoration. For a moment, a pang of the old sorrow hit me, a ghost of the life I had lost. But then it passed. I found myself smiling for them, a genuine, unforced smile. I was happy for their happiness. And in that moment, I knew I was going to be okay. I had survived. I had faced the monster that lived in my home, and I had won. My parents had justice. I had my freedom. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was my life, earned through fire and truth. I still think about that day in the church sometimes. The priest's trembling finger, the collective gasp, the scent of lilies turning sour. It was the end of my world, but it was also the beginning of my salvation. It was the day the truth, in all its terrible and cleansing power, finally refused to stay buried any longer, and it set me free. My life is quiet now, and I cherish the quiet. I find peace in simple things, the smell of old books, the warmth of the sun on my face, the loyal friendship of a woman who stood by me when my world burned down. I am no longer defined by what they did to me, but by how I survived it. I am Clara Miller, daughter of James and Catherine Miller, and I am finally at peace.